Hi, this is Steve Schecter. Welcome to Empower the Student. Tonight, I'm delighted to have with me Max Hergenrother. Max is Associate Dean of Academic Technology and Pedagogic Innovation at St. John's University. Welcome, Max.
Thank you, Steve, for having me here. Happy to be here and can't wait to see what we talk about.
Wonderful. Well, Max, you are someone that I've known as having a unique blend of in your thinking and your experience of art and technology. So I'm really looking forward to your perspectives on how you how we train people for the future. This the our this whole series is an attempt to take a look at where education is going and to have some educated opinions on what we'd like to see coming out of all the changes taking place.
Yeah,
So,
it
sorry.
is. No, it's definitely a fascinating topic and something that I give a lot of thought to on a regular basis in my personal time, in my work. And it is definitely an interesting time in our lives right now where we're thinking about these kind of questions and ready to get into it.
Fantastic. So, when you hear us use the term empower the student, what does that phrase mean to you?
Well, to me, empowering the student means to be able to give them the tools that they need in order to be successful at what they want to accomplish. You know, depending on where you are in your education, we all have different needs as students. I deal in higher ed, and higher ed is a very diverse pool of people's goals, like whether they're going into business or art or finance, biology, etc. There is a different set of expectations for their outcomes, ultimately to become good critical thinkers, smart human beings, and to be able to be skilled to go into a workforce are some of those qualities that they're overlapping qualities, for the student going into higher ed, but what those specifics are vary greatly depending on the discipline.
Yeah, but you touched upon some common threads there. I heard critical thinking. I heard some professional development, being able to go into a workplace. So those are good, and I would say those are needful. So when you talk about empower the student, were there any personal experiences along the way, or even along the way or now, that make empowering the student a meaningful term for you?
So my personal relationship with this is that I deal on a regular basis with um, high impact practices for faculty and educators, dealing with specialized learning environments that have to deal with a lot of technology or specialized spaces that allow certain um, curriculum to be taught for the students. And there is a certain amount of um, thought and needs that go into each one of these um, different disciplines that students will um, need to go through. If let's take a cybersecurity lab, that's going to be very, very different looking than somebody who's going to be in an advertising course. Very, very different than somebody who's going to be a painter when they get out of here. Very, very different than somebody who's going to need to go into business background, have access to things like Bloomberg terminals and look at stock tickers and understand how to deal with spreadsheets. Very different than somebody who's going to be in physics or biology that has to do with the hard sciences and labs that they would pertain to. So for me, pairing space, pairing the need to accomplish some sort of pedagogy, some sort of academic teachings, and pairing the space and equipment that's needed becomes very front and center to some of the things that I do inside my daily activities at work. So working with faculty members, talking to them about the modalities in which they teach? Are these fully face-to-face classes? Are these hybrid classes? Are they doing high flex situations in education? Are they needing some sort of specialized equipment that's outside of table and chair or writing terminal or laptop that students need to take notes with? Delivery of the content and how the student will probably learn the best, depending on what kind of learner they are, is all things to take into consideration. And when it goes to empowering these students, you know, dealing with the most easily accessible or delivery methods that the faculty can have to achieve these goals, or to give the students what they need, their tool package, their toolbox, these become ways that I think about empowering the students.
Yeah. So can you give me an example, like almost like a case example of an environmental change and the difference it affected?
Sure. So we always are looking forward to not where we are now with the technology that we use in our spaces, but where we want to be going forward in the next few years. And these happen when you deal with technology spaces. You're always buying the best that you can do in the present, and then riding through a 4 or 5 year refresh cycle before that room is going to get touched again, to potentially either upgrade existing equipment or to refresh the kind of equipment that's going to go into it to better adapt to changing technology.
Yep.
So we currently have a television and film center, which is in mass communications. And the last time that the infrastructure was touched, that was actually physical space inside this environment, was set up to with a big room and curtains and television cameras, and replicated what they were doing in a broadcast television. And so broadcast television was, when it was constructed, late 80s, early 90s, I believe, was when the physical room was constructed, and equipment refreshed over time, gotten to the point where the media form has changed in its content delivery system. So there is still such a thing as broadcast television, but it is diversified now into podcasting, vlogging, depending on the kind of media that you're producing. This will vary greatly. And as far as it incorporates into television production, film production, the kind of coursework that we use, there are a number of different tool sets that are used now, which are vastly different than before. So we have found that there are game engines, Unity and Unreal Engine are these two major softwares that we're adopting now into a different discipline, which was video game design. So video game design was able to create, students were able to create these photorealistic environments that they use to create the maps within their video games. But the same exact engines can be used, the same exact software can be used to create virtual environments where we can take our film students or our television students and put them in front of a camera in an environment which is completely fabricated, and be able to, instead of build physical sets like we were originally doing in the 90s, now take them and do digitized virtual environments, which lowers the footprint of the space that we need for storage of physical equipments. It's faster turnover to be able to plug in a location that we want to take our actors and students to, and we're able to share resources between cross-discipline students. And so working in this method has caused us to change the way we looked at those walls, which had the television studio, and looking forward to the next 5 years as a baseline of industry, taking this next stage in the evolution of our media center and create, all the ecosystem that's going to support this new technology to enrich and change the way that the faculty are able to interact and teach these practices with our students, and give them a focus towards how the new trends are for current and future practices within their industries. And so this has been a way that we've actually gone from a lower trend in enrollment for something to a new surge of interest into this area, not just because of the high-techness of it, but because there is a multitude of different things that can be accomplished with these new tools that are in the space.
Yeah, I'm hearing a bunch of goodies here, Max. I'm hearing that you're keeping the technology relevant. So the high tech part is important, because if empowering the student is hopeless if you're dealing with outdated technology. It's almost hopeless. But it's also, it sounds like you're vastly expanding what you're able to teach the student, so that what you were describing about you creating the virtual environments, you can start teaching stuff that might be prohibitively costly to teach otherwise. And then the third thing I'm hearing is that this kind of pedagogical innovation enables you to serve a market of one, meaning that you're able to pinpoint more precisely what the student really needs to learn and deliver that, as opposed to something that is standardized and may be, serve everybody weakly and no one strongly. So it sounds like the kind of thing that you're talking about enables you to meet more students' needs better. That's what I'm hearing.
That is an ongoing challenge in the role that I take on, and one that is always of concern. I mean, if we had an endless amount of space and an endless amount of money, we'd be able to serve everybody as niche as possible, with exactly what they needed. But because there is limitations in space. We are in New York after all, and limitations with budget constraints. Even big companies have budgets for projects that they work on. There are always this criteria where you're trying to do the greatest good with a consolidated effort in order to do so.
Yeah.
And so these essentially will be able to serve all of the communication students that we have, and even to another degree, if you think about an industry like game development and design, we can actually, once we get senior students involved, we can take on research projects and actually build in-house solutions for other departments. We're thinking about working with our Homeland Security Department and building simulations for them. We have opportunities to work across colleges if we can build simulations that will be able to be used by other disciplines like the hard sciences, etc. And if we're not building the in-house solutions for them, because we're using and having this technology inside an active learning space, we can potentially invite other disciplines in who would not be, the first group of people that you would think about for this space, in order to better utilize the assets that we're getting better programming of the space and having a more diverse group of people use it, essentially.
Very
More
cool.
more bang for the buck.
Very cool. Very cool. Great challenge to take on. So let's zigzag a little bit. Let's take an imaginative leap a little bit. When I was a parent of younger children, I thought about the educational system. I thought about what I hoped my children would get from their education. And I even mused for a bit about what an educational system that I was superintendent of might look like. So let's take that little imaginative exercise. You're given a system to run. What does it look like? What would you consider the important elements of it?
I think the importance elements of a system are to essentially our learning environment is to, or in higher education, right? We are a business that is to deliver an education to a student for a specified need. These vary greatly across the university. Is our job in order to deliver a good education to them. I've talked a little bit about specialized spaces, etc. But if we're talking about um, what's an ideal education? I think more importantly now, because the way the technology is advancing, it is our job as educators to make um, critical thinkers, people who come out of an education being able to contribute to the creative process, to um, coming up with novel ideas, artifacts, and not relying on tools to get them there, because there is more and more development of tools, large language models, chatbots, AI in general, that's able to emulate human creativity, but it tends to be um, a little bit devoid of content without the proper steering of an educated individual in order to get them there. So where 50 years ago or even 20 years ago, it was really important for us as educators to be able to deliver content, students absorb content, students repeat content, and by that they gain knowledge. And we're living now in a time where accurate information can be given at a moment's notice, recall, with the internet at your fingertips, with chatbots that are trained on the internet at your fingertips to be able to give you this information. It's our job, I think, as humans, to be able to drive what questions to ask, to be able to know enough to be able to think about the answers that we are being given and not take them at face value, and for us to be able to make changes happen out of our own free will and not letting the machines think about how to make the changes for us. Which is a very interesting time we're in, because everybody's trying to grapple with these things in higher education, and maybe in primary and secondary education soon enough, if it's not happening already. So with us, it's what are the right questions to ask? How do we use the tools that are at our disposal in an effective manner? And what kind of policies do we use as an institution? These I don't have all of the answers to right now, because these are ongoing discussions that are in a lot of people's daily activities in higher education. I'm just sort of one member of this group, but we are thinking about what that answer is to that question and how to be proactive in creating good educated students. And I think that the way that looks is going to change dramatically. The way we deliver our content will probably change dramatically.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I certainly did not have an expectation going into the conversation that you'd have all the answers, but I do appreciate your framing of the goal as a goal of creating critical thinkers, and even defining that as creating students who can ask the right questions. That's a big thing.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
let's
in a world where all of the answers can be given to you at a moment's notice, it really does become, what is the question to ask?
right. Yeah. Right. What are the questions to ask? Possibly even what values are we trying to uphold in asking these
Mhm.
questions? Because
Yeah,
values are still a
what
human thing.
it is that is an inherently human quality. And while a machine may be able to fake it, it doesn't have emotion, it doesn't have empathy, it doesn't have any sense of whether it has bias or not. There are things that we as humans need to be able to internalize and reflect on, and be able to have our own creative curation of this information that we have, be able to organize it in a way that makes sense to us as human beings, so that we take something that is an excellent resource and an excellent tool, in my opinion, and be able to do good with it, instead of making us weaker. It needs to make us stronger.
I certainly like that goal. Yeah. And I think, using quantum terminology, I think both outcomes are equally possible. We could predict both outcomes with equal confidence. So let's talk about the evolution of your own thinking. One of the things I like best about my own background is I have a blend of music and systems, and you have what is among the people I know, you have a unique blend of art and technology. Um, how do you see those playing together in your evolution? What do you see as some of the advantages of your having an art background and a technology background? What are the cool parts of that?
Well, I think my art background manifested because I was curious and creative. And those were two things that I was able to do well with art. When you pair that with having fairly decent eye-hand coordination, fine motor skills, it seemed like an easy win for me, art, for a while. And but the act of creating, the act of turning thoughts and ideas into artifacts in reality, that was gave me pleasure, right? And it was something that was paired over time with technology. So my art allowed me to access technology, and these were another set of tools at the time that I was thinking about. I started using, Photoshop, Adobe Creative Cloud, eventually 3D modeling, 3D printing, generative AI for images. It sort of evolves over time. And so technology, to me, is a tool. It's no different than a hammer, or a saw or a paintbrush, or whether it's something that is creative conceptually or creative in creating a physical object that has some sort of purpose or aesthetic value to the world. There's the act of going from concept to manifestation, right? And technology just happened to be a tool that I was good at, and which enabled me to not just be creative with art, but to be able to be creative in a multitude of different ways, because technology is such a broad tool. And so when you pair that with education, and how I use it across multiple disciplines in my work, this was a tool which just was a good problem-solving tool. And I think for me, it was about being creative and doing creative problem solving. And that was the thing that keeps me going.
Yeah, I can definitely see the blend. So it starts with a creative impulse. It grows to this kind of manifestation, being able to take the inner products of thought and turn them into tangible things, and then it's expanding the domain for creativity across a broad spectrum. But there, you can see the unifying principle is really the act of creation, and replicated now in a much broader setting. It's fun stuff.
It is definitely fun stuff.
It's I mean, I can't think of anything more fun. But let's take that a step further, and let's talk about a term that I hear about I have to confess to you, I don't understand it well,
Mhm.
which is one of the reasons why I asked the question. And I'm candidly trying to get my brain around it because I'm looking for where to take the educational system, or where I'd like to influence the educational system. And it's just very much along the lines of what you're talking about. I'm looking at the human component, and it seems to me like design thinking is part of where humans can have an influence in the decades ahead. So
Mhm.
what is design thinking? Let's start with that.
Well, I learned about design thinking by joining a group called Design Factory as part of a global network. St. John's is one of, I believe, 40 or 42 current either universities or research centers around the world. We have, like I said, maybe about 40 or 42 of these different design factories that are 28 countries, I believe we're in 5 continents. So we're really a global group of people. But the idea for the first design factory it, it was brought up in Alto, and Alto Design Factory was the founder for this, and they take on a European double diamond design thinking philosophy, and they use that into creative problem solving. So on a very high level, there's five components, 5 or 6 components that go into design thinking. And so I can just go into sort of what they are a little bit and kind of bring you around the process of going through. The heart of it, when you start, you're starting with empathy. So your first stage of a process is to get a understanding of a challenge that's happening, something that you want to solve. You know, this could be something that requires physical artifacts or research or a general problem or project for business launch. There's plenty of different ways that these challenges can come about, but there's a user or a client or a person at the end of this that has some sort of challenge that needs to be solved. And so you go through this first stage of design thinking where you're thinking about what the challenge is, who it affects, how it affects them. Do some basic exercises. You can do qualitative interviews, you can do observations with the people who would be experiencing these things. You can do research and sort of understand deeply what the challenge is that you're trying to solve. And then after that, you're going to go in and define exactly what it is that you want to solve, right? So going from this high level of sort of open research, grabbing this to hone in to define and target the problem or challenge that you want to solve, and then going through an ideation process. So ideation process, you're trying to think of all of the different possible outcomes or things that could be ways to solve this problem. And you're going to go from a full range of opposites, like from the most practical to the most impractical to everything in between. All ideas are worth putting out there, because even the things that are probably the least practical and worst ideas should be thought about initially so that you can go through the trains of logic on these, right? Once you do that and you come down to, you know, a couple different ways that you think that the challenge could be met, you go into an ideation process. You're gonna start to prototype what the model is to try to solve this problem. And then there is a prototyping phase and then a testing phase. And so these can actually repeat themselves over time. So you prototype, you know, test, ideate, prototype, test, you know, and you're just refining this process until you go to a point where you've successfully resolved the challenge that you're looking for, and that goes into implementation. So this is very typical in startups for business. Entrepreneurs use this kind of thing a lot. It's used a lot in engineering, for research. You know, it applies to many, many different forms. So design thinking isn't necessarily something that is aesthetic driven. It can be. We have some design factories that are art schools. We have some that are based in engineering. We have some that are in the hard sciences. You know, it really varies greatly. And so that cycle, you know, of going through, you know, empathy, defining, ideation, prototyping, testing, and then repeating that into implementation. They use some methods which are double diamond methods, which you're going from you know, ideation, you know, divergence, and then convergence, and then divergence and convergence into problem solving until you get to the end goal, which is implementation. And that's essentially what design thinking is. And so the way that we try to structure it at St. John's is that we're taking this methodology and setting up a center where we can reach out to all of the different disciplines that use specialized learning environments, our labs, and be able to offer a place where students can come together with big ideas or research projects and give them access to skill sharing pairing with other students, or with access to resources, physical resources like labs that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. So if part of their prototyping and ideation or testing is requiring the need for either another person to be involved with this project or a space or machine in order to be able to create some sort of artifact for testing, we try to make an ecosystem which enables that kind of activity to happen within our learning spaces.
Wow, I'm seeing that as I'm seeing that as a way of not only getting a particular result or a particular project, but it seems to me that in making that available, you're actually teaching students the process of design.
Yeah, they will go through these, you know, guided steps, seminars, in order to get them to come to these conclusions for themselves. They're all going to have their own projects that they're going to want to define and ideate. Now, these people could be in biology, they could be in communications, they could be game designers, they could be you know, in any walk of life within our university. But it generally takes a group of people. If you're taking entrepreneurs, for instance, to be a true entrepreneur, you need to have a variety of different skill sets. It's not just one. You know, you need to be or have on your team the designer, the marketer, the business acumen, the initial ideas for what needs to be solved and how to go about solving these. There's a group, you know, take a half a dozen different kind of skills. You know, you have to get all of these either in one person, which is rare. It's like finding a unicorn, or you have to be able to build good teams. And having people who are good at various traits make for short work when you're doing implementation of big ideas. And so ideally, we would like to be able to use all of our labs, this is a future goal, and create entrepreneurs that have business ideas and get them into business incubators, you know, get them pop-up shops or, you know, seed funding, things like that, for the ones that have the most viable chance of being successful businesses.
Very cool. Would you mind leading me through a couple of specifics? One is just give me an overview of how you used a design thinking process and creation of that one learning environment you spoke about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be
Well,
great.
I mean, that this whole process goes into how we think about constructing our spaces in the first place. I mean, the first people you have to do is you have to empathize. You have to understand, for take into consideration the environment that I was talking about building for the virtual hybrid production, center inside the television center. Who are the people that are in there? What are the needs? And what are they comfortable doing? How are they going to interact and use these tools? Is this space what they want? I mean, you can't build a space and have nobody there to actually use the space. You could build the best tools in the world, but if people don't know how to use the tools or don't want to use the tools, they won't. They'll have you pull out a pencil and a notebook in the room and they'll take notes. They even if the best tools are sitting right next to them or they're sitting on them and not realizing that they're there. So getting the stakeholders together in the beginning of this process, understanding their needs, understanding where they want to go, and having them understand the needs and the direction of where things outside of their control are. What is the industry doing? Where are the trends leading in their discipline? How are they staying relevant within their field for what they're teaching? And getting them all into an area where they can talk about very, very high level goals that they have. We want to be able to achieve this goal. And if you have 5 different or 10 different people who are going to be using that space, what are each of their needs? Where is the overlap? Where is, this is a Venn diagram of human needs. What can we develop where everybody has the base level of what they need in order to be effective communicators or effective educators and be able to deliver relevant content to their student. And so this is where, the empathy is the synthesis. What is the problem that we need to solve? And then going through ideation process. This can be exercises of looking at floor plans and having people push around little pieces of furniture on a piece of paper, drawing where the televisions or tools would be inside of the rooms. If you have 50 feet of space, how many chairs get filled up in that? What kind of things that you're not thinking about actually exist inside this space, and getting it to the point where everybody isn't 100% satisfied, but everybody is 80% satisfied with the way this space works. Because if they can have 80% of the things that they want across the board, they're going to have an effective space to be able to use. And then if that can be effective for 4 different or 5 different subsets, then this becomes a very, very good capital investment that we can use in order to foster the learning inside of the space.
Very powerful. So let's look for a moment at design thinking, like critical thinking, as one of these master skills. So you might have a group of students coming together to do a certain biology project or a neuroscience project or an entrepreneurial project, but one of the deliverables that you've expressed for higher education is developing critical thinkers. So can you talk a little bit about how you help develop design thinkers, how you help develop students that are capable of thinking in this way, which is strikes me as an important way to be able to think?
Well, it's an ongoing process for us, and we are trying to teach the teachers in some ways. And so, we're all trying to identify champions within different disciplines. Who are the people who could adopt this and use it in an effective way, and just get them to understand the methodology, to be able to incorporate it in some of their curriculum that they already teach within the university, and become advocates for this way of thinking. These are people who will draw in their own cohorts of students. And if we have, we have my school particular, CCPS, we have 8 divisions. If we can get 8 people, one from each division, initially into this mindset, into this way where they're incorporating it and creating deliverables within their coursework to get students to be able to think this way. We're already seeding the students of the entire college because they're going to get touch points with these professors along the way. And then, additionally, we do try to host seminars, symposiums, people who talk about design thinking, or will teach a different kind of skill set to students who just want to know, like, do you want to know how to use a 3D printer? Do you want to know how to, use a laser cutter or learn a software program or solder, whatever the hard skill or soft skill may be? There are people who have these innate talents, right? There are people who, we have a host of internal people, and then our own network of external people as well who are willing to talk about these things can come in, and we set up discussions or lectures, discussions, workshops with our students, and it's open invitation. They just have to register and come, and they get to a chance to see what design factory and design thinking is about. They get to decide whether this is something that resonates with them, and if they're interested in more, they become part of the ecosystem and get engaged in future activities that happen.
Yeah, it just strikes me as um, a real superpower set of skills, because it seems to me from what you described, the process of, I may miss a step here, but this process of starting with empathy, ideation, prototyping, and what came after prototyping?
Testing,
Yeah,
iterations of prototyping and testing, and then essentially implementation.
I mean, having been in business myself, this is the real deal. This is really what a lot of young people really ought to be learning how to do. So it's very exciting. So I wonder if we can kind of uh, come to a summary point, touching back with what you said earlier about critical thinking. Can you comment on how, knowing or having a strong sense of where technology is going, um, how do the skills we're talking about, the critical thinking skills and design thinking skills, how do they help the student navigate the future that's emerging? How do we better equip them to handle what's coming? Because what's coming is rapid change, and it could wind up being enormously beneficial. And at the same time, as we're seeing out there, it's also, I think, a little anxiety producing for many. So how do we how do we empower? And empowering means that we help people understand and we help them navigate.
I think that when we're talking about critical thinkers, this is cross-disciplinary. This is design thinking is cross-disciplinary. The technology is getting to the state where, again, we can have information at our fingertips at a moment's notice. And when I'll go back to curation of this information, we need to be able to be driving the decisions and not letting these answers or suggestions that we're being given drive us to the work that we're doing. And design thinking really gives the control over to the people who are using this. We can use any kinds of tools. We can use surveys, we can use artificial intelligence, we can use whatever we need in order to research and gather our information. But to internalize it, to be empathetic, that's to be human, right? Well, this is one of these human points where we cannot let a machine do that thinking for us. We need to be able to take control of that. And we could again diverge and converge between the technologies and the human interactions with it. We can prototype and iterate using tools that are, generative AI if necessary, or a host of other different tools. It's not, necessity that you're going to use these, but you're going to be able to be faster at what you're doing if you know how to use artificial intelligence effectively. What that means is an entire another lecture. I believe it's going to be a 4-hour discussion. But again, humans are the drivers. Humans are making the decisions. This is a human-centric process. And we need to be able to create people who know or understand needs, how to curate information, and how to achieve goals, and how to be relevant. Because, I think a lot of the monotonous things that nobody wants to really do unless they have to, we all do what we need to do to get our paycheck. But there are a lot of things that are the things that are fun and creative and human centric, and they're the things that are, the widget kind of structures. These widget structures are the monotonous tasks will be taken over very quickly and much more effectively by artificial intelligence.
But you're helping me, and thank you to see the human element when we talk about the empathy.
Mhm.
We talk about the creative drive, the drive that you expressed in taking ideas and manifesting them into various shapes and forms that, by the way, have some value to them, have some beauty to them, or meaning to somebody else. That's the human part. Now, one more bonus question, because this is I want to call this a tough question, because and if you don't have an answer at all to it, that's okay too. But let's imagine, let's talk about art, right? We know there are incredible tools available. Even the sciences. I think about music, and I think about my own ability to direct artificial intelligence, and I personally feel grateful for how much I know, because I can curate. And so when it comes to educating, well, let's even start earlier than higher education,
Mhm.
from the beginning. Do you want kids to know how to draw with a pencil? Or would you like to? If you were starting over again, would you still learn to draw?
I would really hope that I would. Um, it was something that was so beneficial to my own creative process for many years. And not that I'm as musically talented as you or your side, but understanding music as well. There is the act of creation, which is different from curation. Um, I've used a lot of generative AI. I've painted a lot of pictures. I've drawn a lot of pictures. AI can make something faster than I can that is technically better than I can make it. But it can do things that are great at taking what's collectively out there and using bits of it as recipes to create something novel. But it doesn't fundamentally make anything that has never happened before. And so these things that they make, they're technically new, but they're based on pre-existing information, right? It is giving you a mix of things that have been before. It has to reference. I want my image that you're giving me to be and list different genres of art, different artists, different time periods, different mediums. You cannot invent, it cannot invent a new medium. It cannot invent a new genre of art that has not existed before, because it's reflecting at things that have been in the past. And so some people are going to argue that all artists are looking at the history of everything that's already been done and using them as inspiration in order to create something that's new. And to some extent of that, that's maybe right. I mean, I don't know where our actual cognition is, as humans, as being sentient beings. We understand that we have experiences, we're aware. What do we do? We create from our own experiences. We're feeding the algorithm information and it's generating something new. But people, I would say, at least for now, have still been the people who have invented all of this stuff that is reflective. Right? And I haven't seen AI be able to truly come up with something that's novel. It's able to solve problems, it's able to make pictures, they're beautiful, but they're not novel ideas.
And if we take this empathy and we take well articulated and well considered values, and we take this joyful creative impulse, and then we add to that incredible processing power, we're going to get to some pretty cool things.
Yeah, future is going to be an interesting ride, and
An interesting ride. I'm glad you used those.
I think that I am just as a curious person, as somebody who is creative and somebody who is a technologist. It is fascinating to me to see where this leads, and I just hope I can do whatever my part is in order to keep people involved in the process.
Well, I have a hunch you will. I want to thank you for being here with me. It's been every bit as fascinating as I hoped, and you've helped me grapple with, which I think you'll admit is not an easy question, this question of how do we evolve human intelligence? I think more people are thinking about how to evolve machine intelligence. So I thank you for helping I think broaden the conversation in a good way.
I'm glad to talk it through with you. Thank you for having me, Steve.
Pleasure, Max.